But 1,400, it's too much. Bob, wherever you are, if you're in the world, go on a diet.
For years, Seinfeld has been called one of the greatest sitcoms ever made. The show ran for 9 seasons and built a legacy that still influences comedy today. But behind the sharp writing and unforgettable characters, the story of how Seinfeld came together was not always as smooth as it looked on screen. There were early casting shakeups, creative disagreements, and moments of tension that most viewers never heard about. Even as the show became a cultural phenomenon, plenty was happening behind the scenes that fans never saw. Now, after all these years, Jerry Seinfeld has finally opened up about what most viewers never realized about the show. The beginning of a comedy that changed television. When Seinfeld first arrived on television, it did not immediately take over the culture. The early episodes slipped onto the air quietly, and for a while, the show about nothing felt like exactly that. But slowly, viewers began to notice something different about it. The conversations felt real, the situations felt familiar, and the strange little annoyances of everyday life somehow turned into comedy gold. Season by season, the audience grew. More people tuned in, more people quoted the jokes, and before long, the series had built a following that kept getting bigger. By the time it finished its run, Seinfeld had lasted 9 seasons and produced 180 episodes, leaving behind countless moments that people still laugh about today. And yet, even after all those years on screen, there were still plenty of details about the show that most fans never knew. The series was created by Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David and originally aired on NBC from July 5, 1989 to May 14, 1998. At its center was Jerry playing a fictional version of himself, living his everyday life in New York alongside 3 people who would become some of television's most recognizable characters. There was his anxious and unlucky best friend, George Costanza, played by Jason Alexander. His quick-witted ex-girlfriend, Elaine Benes, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And his unpredictable neighbor, Cosmo Kramer, brought to life by Michael Richards, whose entrances through Jerry's door quickly became legendary. Behind the scenes, the partnership between Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David drove the entire show. The two originally came together with a much smaller idea, a comedy special called The Jerry Seinfeld Show that was meant to air in a Saturday Night Live time slot. But once they started forming the concept, they quickly realized 90 minutes would never be enough to hold all the ideas they had. So the project grew into a full television series, and that decision changed everything. What began as a simple special turned into a show that would run for nearly a decade and gather millions of loyal viewers along the way. Still, making the show was not always easy. The sets were surprisingly small, especially Jerry's apartment, something Jason Alexander later admitted became frustrating once the series stretched on for years. If anyone had known the show would last 9 seasons, the set would have been built very differently. The scripts also gave the actors very little physical direction, which meant the cast often had to figure out their own movements while delivering lines. Over time, they began guiding each other through scenes, quietly shaping the rhythm of their performances and building the chemistry viewers saw on screen. Filming could run long because Larry David and the cast were relentless about getting a joke right. If a line did not land with the audience the way they wanted, it was rewritten and performed again. During the episode The Marine Biologist, David even wrote an entirely new scene at the last minute, leaving Jason Alexander with only minutes to memorize the now famous monologue. And many of the show's most memorable stories came straight from real life. George's storyline in The Revenge grew out of Larry David's time working at Saturday Night Live. The contest came from another awkward real experience of David's. The smelly car was inspired by a friend who could not get a terrible odor out of his vehicle, while the strike introduced the strange holiday festivus, something writer Dan O'Keefe's father had once invented at home. Even the show's more unusual episodes came from unexpected places. The Chinese restaurant followed Jerry, George, and Elaine, waiting for a table the entire time. The boyfriend stretched a story about baseball star Keith Hernandez across 2 episodes. The Betrayal told its story in reverse order, inspired by a Harold Pinter play. And some plots came straight from headlines and rumors, including the lawsuit storyline in The Maestro and the gossip that inspired The Outing. All of it came together to create a comedy that felt oddly familiar and completely original at the same time, which is exactly why people kept coming back. The casting changes that nearly rewrote Seinfeld. One of the biggest surprises about Seinfeld is that one of its most important characters was not even there in the beginning. Julia Louis-Dreyfus's character, Elaine Baines, did not appear in the pilot at all. In that first episode, the female role belonged to a waitress named Claire, played by Lee Garlington. She was meant to be the regular female presence in the group, but once the show was picked up, the character quietly disappeared, and the writers went back to the drawing board. That search almost took the show in a completely different direction. Several actresses who would later become huge stars were considered for the role of Elaine. Patricia Heaton, Rosie O'Donnell, Mariska Hargitay, and Megan Mullally were all in the mix at one point. Each of them could have brought something interesting to the party, but when Julia Louis-Dreyfus walked into the room, the choice suddenly felt obvious. Her timing, her energy, and the way she bounced off the other actors made it clear that she belonged there. Another casting moment nearly changed the show in an even bigger way. Jerry Seinfeld had originally hoped his friend Jake Johansson would play George Costanza. Johansson turned the role down, which could have been a huge loss at the time. Instead, Jason Alexander stepped in and turned George into one of the most unforgettable characters on television, bringing a level of frantic energy and sharp comedy that carried the show week after week. And believe it or not, the show almost collapsed before it even began. When the pilot was screened for test audiences, the reaction was rough. Many viewers complained that there was barely a story and that the characters felt strange and uninteresting. For a moment, it looked like the show might not survive at all, but slowly, people started to get it. By the time the series reached its 5th season, that little show about everyday annoyances had turned into one of television's biggest hits. How one character change helped save Seinfeld. When Seinfeld first started taking shape, the show looked very different from the one people eventually fell in love with. The early idea leaned heavily toward a male-centered cast. If you watch the pilot episode closely, one thing immediately stands out. Elaine is nowhere to be seen. NBC executives quickly sensed that something was missing. The dynamic felt incomplete, and the network believed the show needed a stronger balance. Their solution was simple but crucial. Add a female character who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Jerry, George, and Kramer. That decision brought Julia Louis-Dreyfus into the picture as Elaine Baines, a character who would soon become one of the most memorable parts of the entire series. Elaine's sharp personality, quick reactions, and unpredictable energy added a new layer to the show and helped shape the rhythm that audiences eventually came to love. Another detail many viewers never notice sits quietly in the background of almost every episode. The show's music constantly changed. The composer adjusted the theme again and again so it would match the tone of each moment. Sometimes the sound leaned into the comedy, giving a scene a playful push. Other times, it softened the moment when a character was frustrated or embarrassed. The changes were subtle, but once you notice them, it becomes hard not to hear how carefully the sound followed the story. Then there was Claire, the waitress who appeared in the pilot. After that first episode, she vanished, and over the years, different stories surfaced about why. One version claimed that Lee Garlington often tried to adjust lines and offer ideas that clashed with Larry David's style. Another story suggested the writers simply realized they needed a stronger female character who could move naturally within the group. Either way, Claire disappeared, Elaine stepped in, and the show that almost felt incomplete suddenly found the balance that would carry it for 9 unforgettable seasons. The risky decisions and behind-the-scenes moments that shaped Seinfeld. For Jerry Seinfeld, the number 9 has always carried a strange kind of weight. The show ran for 9 seasons, and to him that number felt right from the very beginning. When the series reached that point, NBC reportedly offered a staggering deal to continue into a 10th season. The offer was said to be around $5 million per episode. Most people would not hesitate for a second, but Jerry saw it differently. He believed the show had reached the perfect ending point, and he trusted that instinct enough to walk away. That decision meant turning down a deal that could have pushed the show into even bigger profits. Some people later joked that he might have left billions on the table, but Jerry never seemed to regret it. In his mind, finishing on 9 simply felt right. Larry David, meanwhile, was quietly leaving his fingerprints all over the show in ways many viewers never noticed. One of the most memorable examples was George Steinbrenner, the owner of the New York Yankees. The character became a running joke throughout the series, but the audience never actually saw his face. Instead, viewers only heard the voice, and that voice belonged to Larry David himself. The decision to keep Steinbrenner off-screen somehow made the character even funnier. Then there was Elaine's dancing, a moment that would eventually become one of the most famous scenes in the entire series. The stiff movements, the strange arm swings, the knee kicks that looked completely out of rhythm. It was ridiculous in the best possible way. What makes it even better is that the writers were not sure it would work at all. Some worried the scene might fall flat or even embarrass Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Instead, it became one of the most quoted moments in the show's history. Behind the scenes, not every idea landed easily. During the 3rd season, Julia Louis-Dreyfus was pregnant, and the writers had to figure out how to handle it on screen. At one point, Jerry approached her with a storyline suggestion that involved the show joking about her gaining weight. The idea caught her off guard, and the moment was emotional enough that it brought her to tears. Looking back, even that uncomfortable moment became part of the strange creative process that shaped the show. And like so many risky decisions on Seinfeld, it all somehow found its place in the rhythm that made the series unforgettable. The strange decisions that almost changed Seinfeld forever. Not every character on Seinfeld was meant to last. Susan Ross, George Costanza's fiancée, is a perfect example. On paper, the storyline seemed promising, but behind the scenes, something felt off. The cast could sense it, and the chemistry just was not there. The timing felt stiff, and the energy never quite matched the rhythm of the rest of the group. Eventually, the conversation turned serious. Jerry Seinfeld and Julia Louis-Dreyfus were among those who felt the character simply was not working. The real question became how to write Susan out without slowing the show down. That is when Larry David came up with one of the most bizarre solutions in sitcom history. What if Susan died from licking toxic wedding invitation envelopes? It was dark, strange, and completely unexpected, which somehow made it perfect for Seinfeld. The moment instantly closed George's wedding storyline while opening the door for new stories. In typical Seinfeld fashion, tragedy somehow turned into comedy. The show itself almost faced a similar fate long before that moment ever happened. When the series first began under the title The Seinfeld Chronicles, NBC executives were far from convinced it would work. Their confidence was so low that they ordered only 4 episodes after the pilot. It was barely enough time for a show to prove itself. Yet those few episodes were enough to show that something unusual was happening. Slowly, the show gained traction, eventually turning into the same series those early executives had doubted. And then there was Kramer. The wild entrances, the strange logic, the unpredictable energy that could take over an entire scene. Michael Richards built the character with incredible detail, including one small habit most viewers never noticed. Kramer wore the same pair of shoes in almost every scene throughout the show. The only real exception came during a storyline involving vertical lift shoes. Aside from that moment, Kramer stuck with the same footwear the entire time. The wild moments and hidden details behind Seinfeld. Working on a sitcom set can be unpredictable, but few moments were as strange as what happened with actor Lawrence Tierney. When he appeared on Seinfeld, he played an intimidating and unpredictable character, and strangely enough, that energy did not stop once the cameras were off. At one point during filming, Tierney reportedly grabbed a knife from the set kitchen and walked toward Jerry Seinfeld in a way that felt far too real for comfort. The moment left the cast uneasy, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus later described him as a total nut job once filming wrapped. It was one of those rare times when the line between acting and real life felt a little too thin. Long before moments like that happened, the show itself began in a place filled with television history. The very first episode, originally titled The Seinfeld Chronicles, was filmed in Hollywood at the Desilu Cahuenga studio on Stage 8. That same stage had already been home to some of television's most beloved comedies. The Dick Van Dyke Show, I Love Lucy, The Golden Girls, and The Andy Griffith Show had all been connected to the same studio space at different times. Knowing that the first episode of Seinfeld came from that same stage makes it feel like the show was quietly stepping into a long tradition of classic television. Inside the studio audience, one character always created a moment that no one could control. Every time Kramer burst through Jerry's door, the crowd reacted like they were greeting a rock star. The cheers and applause were so loud that they sometimes threw off the rhythm of the scene. What was supposed to be a quick entrance would turn into a wave of clapping that lasted longer than expected. Eventually, the production team had to find ways to control the timing so that at least one joke could land clearly before the audience exploded again. One episode even delivered a moment that was not planned at all. In the famous parking garage episode, Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer spend the entire time wandering around a garage trying to find their cars. The tension builds slowly as they get more frustrated and exhausted. Near the end, Kramer finally reaches the car and jumps in to start it. Instead of the engine roaring to life like the script expected, the car failed again, leaving the moment hanging in awkward silence. The mistake stayed in the episode because it felt so real that it made the scene even funnier. Small details like that were part of what made the show feel authentic, and the same attention appeared in the way the characters dressed. The costume designers quietly used clothing to reveal things about each personality. George Costanza often wore clothes that looked just a little too tight, the kind of outfits that suggested a man constantly uncomfortable in his own skin. Kramer, on the other hand, moved through scenes wearing loose jackets and oversized clothing that matched his strange swagger and unpredictable energy. Even secondary characters had visual quirks that made them stand out. Kenny Bania, for example, carried himself with a confident strut while wearing outfits that were just a bit too big, which somehow made his presence even more ridiculous. The wardrobe choices were never random. Every jacket, every shirt, every pair of pants helped shape how the audience understood the character before they even spoke. It was another layer in a show already packed with clever writing, strange situations, and moments that often felt completely unpredictable, both on screen and behind the scenes. The risky episodes and close calls that nearly changed Seinfeld. Some of the most memorable moments on Seinfeld almost never happened at all. Take the famous episode, The Chinese Restaurant. Today, it is remembered as one of the funniest episodes in the entire series, but when the idea was first pitched, network executives were not impressed. The entire episode revolved around Jerry, George, and Elaine standing inside a restaurant waiting for a table. No big story, no dramatic twist, just three people stuck in a situation everyone has experienced. To the executives, it sounded pointless. To Larry David, it sounded perfect. He believed the whole point of the show was to turn ordinary frustrations into comedy, and nothing felt more relatable than waiting endlessly to be seated while the host kept saying, "Your table would be ready soon." David pushed for the episode anyway, and once it aired, it became one of the clearest examples of what the show about nothing was really meant to be. Not every episode landed quite so smoothly. One moment involving Kramer created controversy that few people expected. In a chaotic scene, Kramer accidentally burns a Puerto Rican flag while trying to light a cigar in his apartment. What was meant to be a ridiculous gag quickly became something much more serious for viewers who felt the moment crossed a line. The reaction was strong enough that NBC eventually issued an apology to the National Puerto Rican Coalition. It was a reminder that even a comedy built around absurd situations could sometimes step into uncomfortable territory. Some ideas never even made it that far. At one point, the writers considered an episode centered on Jerry buying a gun. The concept was meant to explore the awkwardness and absurdity of the situation in the same way the show tackled everyday annoyances. But the more they looked at it, the more they realized the topic simply would not fit the tone of the series. The episode was quietly dropped before filming ever began. Even within the cast, there were moments of tension as the show grew. One episode set in Florida left George Costanza completely out of the story. For Jason Alexander, that decision did not sit well. George had become such a central part of the show that being written out of an episode felt like a serious slight. In frustration, Alexander even suggested he might leave the series altogether. Thankfully, that moment passed quickly, and George remained exactly where fans wanted him. In the early days, none of this success felt guaranteed. When the first season finished airing, Larry David reportedly believed the experiment might already be over. The show had found a small audience, but nothing suggested it was about to become a television phenomenon. NBC, however, saw something growing beneath the surface. The network ordered 13 more episodes for a second season, giving the show a real chance to find its voice. That decision changed everything. The series continued to grow, the audience kept expanding, and what once looked like a small, strange comedy quietly turned into one of the most influential sitcoms ever made, the real-life inspiration and bold rules that defined Seinfeld. George Costanza may look like the most ordinary guy on the show, but the character actually came from somewhere very real. Larry David based George on a man he once knew named Michael Costanza. The resemblance turned out to be so accurate that Michael himself was not amused. He believed the show had copied his personality and life too closely, and eventually filed a lawsuit against Larry David, NBC, and the show itself for $100 million. The case did not last long. The lawsuit eventually fell apart, and George Costanza continued living as one of the most recognizable characters in television comedy. The irony is that the show's greatest strength was always its ability to take the smallest details of everyday life and turn them into something hilarious. Larry David had a very clear vision for how the characters should behave, and that vision became known as the famous no hugging, no learning rule. On Seinfeld, characters did not suddenly become better people. They did not grow emotionally. They did not solve their problems with heartfelt moments. And they almost never learned anything from their mistakes. Instead, the show leaned into awkward situations and uncomfortable truths about everyday behavior. People acted selfishly, made bad choices, and often doubled down on those mistakes. That approach gave the show a tone that felt sharper and more honest than most sitcoms at the time. Even the ending followed that same idea. While many comedies wrap things up with happy conclusions, Seinfeld went in a completely different direction. In the final episode, Jerry, George, Elaine, and Kramer all end up in jail after their long list of questionable behavior finally catches up with them. It was darker than most viewers expected, but it also fit perfectly with the show's refusal to soften its characters. For years, people have called Seinfeld a show about nothing, but that phrase never told the full story. What the show really did was highlight the strange little moments that fill everyday life. The awkward conversations, the petty arguments, the odd habits people carry around without even realizing it. That idea was there from the very beginning. When Jerry Seinfeld first pitched the show to NBC, the concept was built around the idea that his stand-up comedy came from observing his own life and the strange situations that happened around him. Those stand-up segments that opened many episodes were not just jokes. They were small reflections of the same ridiculous moments the characters were about to experience. And that simple idea, turning everyday life into comedy, became the engine that carried the show through 9 unforgettable seasons. The fortune, real-life characters, and what almost came after Seinfeld. By the late 1990s, Jerry Seinfeld had reached a level of success few people in television had ever seen. In 1998, the year the show came to an end, the numbers surrounding Seinfeld were almost hard to believe. A massive syndication deal worth about $1.7 billion sent the show into constant reruns across television, turning it into a permanent part of pop culture. According to Forbes, that deal alone helped Jerry earn around $267 million in a single year. It was one of the biggest financial moments in television history, and proof that a simple idea about everyday life could grow into something enormous. For anyone chasing a dream, it became one of those rare stories that showed just how far a creative idea could travel. Of course, the show's success also brought attention to some of its most unforgettable characters. One of the most famous was the strict and intimidating restaurant owner fans remember as the Soup NZ. The character became an instant classic, known for his short temper and the famous line that shut down customers without warning. What made the story even stranger was that the character had a real-life inspiration. He was based on a New York soup shop owner named Al Yeganeh. Unlike the fans who loved the character, Yeganeh was not amused by the comparison and was reportedly unhappy that the show had used his personality without asking. Whether he liked it or not, the character became one of the most talked about guest appearances in the entire series. Even the smallest details in the show carried hidden meaning. Longtime viewers eventually noticed something clever about the first and last episodes. Both featured Jerry and George talking about something completely ordinary: buttons. It sounds simple, almost pointless, but that was exactly the joke. Conversations about the smallest things were always at the heart of the show. When the final episode aired, that same idea quietly came full circle. The show ended almost exactly where it began, with two friends talking about something trivial while everything around them continued moving forward. After the series ended, NBC was not ready to say goodbye so easily. The network explored the idea of keeping part of the Seinfeld universe alive through a spin-off centered on the flashy lawyer Jackie Childs, the character loosely inspired by attorney Johnny Cochran. Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David even discussed the idea with actor Phil Morris, who played Childs on the show. For reasons that were never fully explained, the project never moved forward. The spin-off quietly faded away, leaving Jackie Childs as one of the many unforgettable characters who appeared briefly, but left a lasting impression. And in a way, that felt perfectly in line with the strange world of Seinfeld. What Seinfeld episode is your favorite? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.